Fallen angels. Human women. Giants born of a forbidden union. The Nephilim are among the most mysterious and fascinating figures in the entire Bible. But what happened to them? And where are their descendants now? When the sons of God came down to earth and took human women as wives, something shifted, forever. It was the crossing of two worlds, divine and mortal. From this union came the Nephilim, giants. Powerful. Terrifying. Mysterious. Beings that were neither fully human nor fully divine. These were not myths. Not metaphors. They were real. So real, so disruptive, that God himself chose to erase them, with a great flood. But why? Who exactly were the Nephilim? What happened to the children born of this unnatural marriage? And the most unsettling question of all, did they truly vanish? Or are they still here? Hidden among us? Today, we explore one of the Bible's most shadowed and silenced accounts. Fallen angels. Human women. Forgotten giants. This is the story most ignore, and few dare to explore. Genesis 6:1-4 presents a cryptic and controversial passage. It tells us that the sons of God saw that the daughters of men were beautiful and took them as wives, and their union produced mighty men of old, men of renown. But who are these sons of God? There are three main theories. The first and most ancient is that they were fallen angels, celestial beings who descended and transgressed divine boundaries. The second theory claims they were descendants of the godly line of Seth, intermarrying with the sinful line of Cain. The third suggests they were rebellious heavenly beings, distinct from the traditional angelic hierarchy. Regardless of which interpretation one holds, the product of this union is described as the Nephilim. But who are the Nephilim? Were they literal giants? Heroes of mythic strength? Or were they hybrids, part divine, part human? The word Nephilim itself is debated. It may come from the Hebrew root naphal, meaning to fall, thus interpreted as the fallen ones. Others suggest it could mean those who cause others to fall, or more simply, giants. The book of Genesis offers no elaborate backstory, just a brief mention that is echoed through history, inspiring fear, fascination, and endless speculation. Who were these beings that walked the earth in ancient times? And what made their presence so intolerable to God that it would lead to a global judgment? The union between the sons of God and the daughters of men wasn't just a romantic or physical affair, it was a catastrophic event that altered the course of humanity. These hybrids, the Nephilim, were not mere men. They represented a breach in the divine order. They embodied corruption, power without accountability, knowledge without humility. The result? A world teetering on the edge of chaos. Genesis 6:12 tells us, all flesh had corrupted their way upon the earth. These words imply a systemic contamination, not just of moral behavior but of creation itself. The earth was no longer what God had intended. The presence of the Nephilim symbolized a corruption that was deep, irreversible, and possibly beyond redemption. Were these beings redeemable? Or were they outside the scope of salvation because they were not entirely human? Their very existence challenged the harmony of the cosmos. It wasn't just a problem of giants roaming the earth, it was a matter of spiritual warfare, of divine intervention. The offspring of heaven and earth were tearing reality apart. And the only solution, as we'll see, was a reset. A flood. A global judgment. The story of Noah's flood is often portrayed as a moral tale about human wickedness spiraling out of control. But there is more at stake in this narrative than simple disobedience. At its core, the flood story is about cosmic disorder. It is about the violent collapse of boundaries between heaven and earth, between spirit and flesh, between the divine and the created order. The union between the sons of God and the daughters of men was not merely forbidden. It was unnatural. It represented a violation of the very fabric of creation, a fusion that should never have occurred. And from this fusion came the Nephilim. Beings not fully divine, not fully human, but something else entirely. Giants. Tyrants. Corruptors. Their existence signaled a deep rupture in the order God had designed. The earth was no longer just sinful. It was contaminated. The bloodlines were defiled. The creatures roaming the land were no longer as God had made them. Genesis tells us that all flesh had corrupted its way upon the earth. And so God made a decision, not only to judge but to cleanse. Not merely a spiritual cleansing, but a biological, genealogical, and possibly even dimensional reset. This was not just about starting over. It was about cutting off a cancer before it consumed everything. Noah is introduced as a man who was perfect in his generations. Many scholars believe this phrase refers not only to moral righteousness, but also to the fact that Noah's lineage remained pure, untainted by the hybridization that had infected the world. In a time when the DNA of humanity was under threat from supernatural interference, Noah and his family were chosen not just for their faith, but for their preservation of human identity. The ark was not only a vessel of salvation. It was a vault, a genetic ark, carrying the blueprint of an uncorrupted humanity into a new age. When the floodwaters came, they were not just a punishment. They were a targeted strike. The fountains of the great deep burst forth. The skies opened. The flood was overwhelming and absolute. Everything that drew breath outside the ark perished. And with them, the Nephilim were washed away, or so it seemed. But questions remained. Was it truly the end of the Nephilim? Could any of them have survived? Or did their spirits linger beyond the physical destruction? Did their influence somehow persist through hidden bloodlines, spiritual residue, or forbidden knowledge passed down in secret? These are not just speculative questions. They strike at the heart of the biblical narrative and at the core of many ancient traditions across cultures. The flood was meant to be a clean slate, a divine act of mercy through destruction. But the shadow of the Nephilim has never fully disappeared. Their story continues to echo in myth, in scripture, and in human imagination. And so we ask you, the listener, do you feel this is more than just an old story? Has this narrative shaped civilizations, inspired fear, or sparked questions in your own heart? If you believe this story holds deeper meaning, about who we are, where we come from, and what forces have influenced our history, tell us how much it matters to you. Share your thoughts, your theories, your questions. Because perhaps the past is not as distant as it seems. When people think of the Nephilim, they often imagine towering warriors or terrifying giants. But what about the children? If the Nephilim existed, then at some point, there were hybrid infants, babies born of angels and human mothers. The Bible does not explicitly mention them, but their implied existence raises haunting questions. What happened to them during the flood? Were they destroyed along with the rest of the Earth's population? Did they grow up? Did any survive? And perhaps most troubling, what happens to the soul of a being that's not fully human? According to the Book of Enoch, the Nephilim caused such devastation that God decreed their spirits would become disembodied, cursed to wander the earth. They could not ascend to heaven nor return to the angelic realm. They would become what we now know as demons. But would this same fate apply to innocent children? Some scholars argue that the flood wiped them out completely. God's judgment was absolute. Every trace of the hybrid lineage was to be erased, infants, children, even unborn. But others suggest something different. Some believe the remnants survived, hidden, protected, or even recreated after the flood. Numbers 13:33 hints at this possibility, when the spies say, "We saw the descendants of Anak. We seem like grasshoppers in our own eyes." This would suggest that Nephilim reappeared, or never truly vanished. How is this possible? One theory is that another group of angels repeated the rebellion after the flood. Another proposes that a trace of Nephilim DNA survived through the wives of Noah's sons. If so, their bloodline may have continued, diluted but not extinct. In that case, Nephilim babies grew up. They may have blended into human society. They may have multiplied. And their descendants, if any remain, could be walking among us today. These ideas are echoed in myths across cultures, tales of demigods, divine children, supernatural hybrids. Could the story of the Nephilim be the biblical version of a global pattern? And if so, are we still living with the consequences? Some believe Nephilim descendants have remained hidden for centuries, embedded in secret bloodlines, royal families, or spiritual hierarchies. Others connect their legacy to modern phenomena, abductions, genetic experiments, hybrid theories, artificial intelligence. But perhaps the real question isn't where are the Nephilim babies? But who have they become? If the Nephilim spirit lives on, in body or in influence, we may not be dealing with a myth of the past, but a reality of the present. One that is watching, waiting, and influencing the world in ways we're only beginning to understand. To better understand the Nephilim, many scholars turn to apocryphal texts, especially the enigmatic and powerful Book of Enoch. Although it's not part of the canon in most Christian Bibles, this ancient Hebrew text is key to understanding the spiritual dimension of the Nephilim story. The Book of Enoch introduces us to the Watchers, a group of angels assigned to observe the earth. But these angels broke their mission. They looked upon the daughters of men and fell in love with them. Instead of simply observing, they chose to descend to earth and take them as wives. This rebellious group of angels is called the Grigori, led by an angel named Semiazon. They made a pact among themselves, swearing to act together so that no one would suffer punishment alone. When these unions occurred, the children born were described as massive Nephilim giants, who devoured everything humans produced. When Earth's resources ran dry, these giants turned against humanity, consuming men themselves and even drinking their blood. The world descended into terror. Humanity cried out to the heavens for help. Their cries reached God. God then commanded the archangels to intervene. Michael, Raphael, Gabriel, and Uriel received clear missions: imprison the Watchers, destroy the Nephilim, and restore order to the earth. The rebellious angels were sentenced to be bound in the depths until the day of judgment. But the Nephilim? Their bodies were destroyed. But their corrupted souls remained on earth. The Book of Enoch states that these souls became the evil spirits that now roam the world. According to the text, these spirits are thirsty, restless, and hostile toward mankind, because they were born from rebellion. They wander without peace, tormenting the living. This explanation reshapes the entire spiritual narrative. Hybrid giant spirits haunting the earth? This leads us to consider phenomena such as possession, spiritual disturbances, and supernatural manifestations that defy logic. And more, the Book of Enoch suggests that the Watchers knew they were violating divine law. That's why their punishment was so severe. They not only taught sorcery and heavenly secrets to humanity but also altered the course of human history with corrupted knowledge. Weapons, enchantments, astrology, metallurgy, herb lore, all of it, according to Enoch, was taught by the fallen angels, initiating an age of spiritual and moral decay. The destruction of the Nephilim, then, wasn't merely physical. It was a spiritual war to purge the earth of a contamination that went beyond flesh and blood. The Bible mentions this briefly. But the Book of Enoch dives deep into the celestial drama unfolding behind the scenes. It connects the Nephilim directly to the chaos that preceded the flood and shows that God responded not only with judgment, but with direct angelic intervention. And even after their physical destruction, the Nephilim left behind an invisible legacy, a spiritual war that continues to this day. What began as a forbidden union between celestial beings and human women became a cosmic tragedy with consequences still echoing through the ages. Could these spirits still be a malevolent influence on humanity today? Could they be behind unexplained disorders, manifestations beyond logic, possessions, and spiritual warfare? For many ancient scholars and theologians, the answer is yes. And if that's true, the Nephilim never truly disappeared. They were only transformed, made invisible. But they are still here. The flood wiped them out. The Watchers were bound. The Nephilim bodies were destroyed. But their spirits remained, restless, wandering, hostile. So the question that echoes across time is, will they return? Many ancient traditions, and even some modern interpretations, suggest that the Nephilim are not gone for good. According to certain prophetic interpretations, particularly in apocalyptic literature, their reappearance is not only possible, but inevitable. One of the most cited verses in this context is Daniel 2:43, "They will mingle with the seed of men, but they will not cleave to one another." Many theologians believe this mysterious verse alludes to a future event, a return of hybrid beings, mixing with humanity once again, but never fully integrating. A new generation of Nephilim? Or something worse? In light of current technologies and ethical questions, this theme becomes even more disturbing. The idea of human DNA being manipulated through genetic engineering, artificial intelligence, or transhumanist experiments raises the possibility that a new form of hybridization could be happening, not by fallen angels this time, but by the hands of men. Could this be the new path through which the ancient corruption returns? In today's world, there are frequent reports of supernatural manifestations, alien abduction narratives, beings of great stature or strange abilities, and other phenomena that some claim to be tied to Nephilim activity. Many theorists point to these patterns and ask, are these the signs of their reawakening? Could the same rebellious spirits, once banished by divine judgment, be influencing human culture again? This time not through brute force, but through ideology, science, and deception? Others suggest that secret bloodlines continue from ancient times, hidden dynasties that trace their ancestry to the Nephilim, maintaining influence in high places, waiting for a prophetic moment to rise again. The Book of Revelation, rich in symbols and cosmic battles, speaks of a return of chaos before the final restoration. Some believe that among the forces unleashed in the last days will be the spirits of the ancient giants, masked under modern forms but driven by the same ancient rebellion. And if the Nephilim were once part angel, part human, the return might not be what we expect. Perhaps it won't come in the form of towering giants, but as influences, ideologies, movements, or even technologies that alter human nature itself. The spirit of the Nephilim could return not just in flesh, but in essence, in the breaking of boundaries between human and non-human, natural and artificial, sacred and profane. In that sense, their return could already be happening. quietly, gradually, through our screens, our experiments, our ambition to transcend human limits. And what if this time, humanity is willingly embracing the very beings that once brought it to ruin? The ancient world feared the Nephilim. Today, some admire them, as symbols of power, evolution, or forbidden knowledge. That alone may be the most dangerous sign of all. So we ask again, did the Nephilim truly vanish, or have they simply taken new forms, waiting to rise again in the shadows of the end times? The Nephilim weren't just myth or metaphor. According to the ancient texts, they were real, born from a forbidden union between heaven and earth. Their existence marked a fracture in the divine order, a contamination that led to the greatest judgment the world had ever seen, the flood. But even after their destruction, the story didn't end. Their legacy continued, through spirits, bloodlines, and the lingering memory of giants that once ruled the earth. Today, as we search for answers, we're left with a chilling possibility: what if the Nephilim were never fully gone? What if their spirits still wander, shaping culture, power, and hidden knowledge? What if humanity is unknowingly reviving the very rebellion that led to its near destruction? Maybe they don't look like giants anymore. Maybe they don't need to. If their essence is influence, if their legacy is corruption, then the return of the Nephilim may not be a matter of size, but of spirit. In a world obsessed with genetic manipulation, artificial intelligence, and the merging of man with machine, it's worth asking, are we becoming the new hybrids? Are we, ourselves, opening the same door that once unleashed the giants? The Nephilim story challenges us to look deeper, not just into ancient history, but into our own time. Their origin was rebellion. Their end was judgment. But their shadow lingers. And perhaps the most important question isn't where the children of the Nephilim are, but rather, who they've become. If you're fascinated by this kind of content, ancient mysteries, forgotten stories, and the hidden truths behind sacred texts, we have something special for you. Check out the link in the video description to discover a product that can take you even deeper into this hidden world. It might be a revealing book, a powerful documentary, or even a tool to expand your understanding of spiritual realities. Click the link in the description and see for yourself. If this topic resonates with you, maybe this is the next step in your journey.